What happens when two of the most powerful women in entertainment collide, live, with the world watching? What was supposed to be a routine episode of The View turned into a moment that sent shockwaves through the industry. Angelina Jolie and Meghan Markle, on the same stage, in a confrontation so sharp, so personal, that viewers were left stunned, speechless, and scrambling to hit rewind. It started like any other broadcast. Meghan Markle was already seated at the table, poised and polished, promoting her latest charitable initiative. The mood was warm, until producers announced a surprise guest, Angelina Jolie. The second she stepped onto the stage, the air changed, cooler, tighter. You could feel the history between them, the tension that had never been acknowledged, but always rumored. Hollywood insiders knew. These two had unfinished business. "Well, this is unexpected," Meghan said, adjusting her posture just slightly, her smile tight. "I wasn't aware we'd be sharing the panel today." Angelina didn't even blink. She sat down, her signature calm radiating control. "Sometimes," she said smoothly, "the most important conversations happen when you're not expecting them. Especially when it's time to separate real humanitarian work from branding exercises." The studio froze. Even the co-hosts didn't know whether to lean in or look away. Joy Behar tried to cut the tension with a laugh about having two icons on the same panel, but neither woman cracked a smile. They were already locked in a silent standoff, perfectly polite, and absolutely lethal. "You know, Angelina," Meghan began, her voice taking on that careful, rehearsed diplomacy honed from years inside the palace. "I've always admired your advocacy, though some of us believe that real impact comes from working within established systems, not just criticizing them from the outside." The shot was subtle, but direct. Angelina's lips curved just slightly, though her eyes stayed cold. "I've spent the last 20 years in refugee camps, Meghan. Not charity galas. I've held dying children, not posed for magazine spreads. So when you talk about systems," she leaned in slightly, "you'll have to forgive me if I question which ones you actually understand." The room went dead silent. A flush crept up Meghan's neck, but her media training kicked in. "I think we all contribute in our own ways. My work has been impactful, perhaps just not as, shall we say, dramatic as some other approaches." Dramatic. The word dropped like a spark in gasoline. Angelina's voice stayed composed, but now there was steel in every syllable. "Dramatic," she echoed. "You know what I find dramatic? Preaching compassion from multimillion-dollar estates. Wearing 50,000 jewelry while talking about poverty. Giving lectures on empathy from a branded Instagram feed. That's dramatic." Whoopi Goldberg raised a hand to intervene, but neither woman flinched. "I hardly think personal attacks are necessary," Meghan said, her smile faltering. "We're here to talk about causes, not indulge in jealousy disguised as morality." Jealousy. Angelina finally turned and looked directly at her. The smile on her face was so faint it was almost invisible, but the ice in her voice made everyone lean in. Jealous of what, exactly? The ability to make every global issue somehow revolve around your own story. To turn advocacy into a publicity vehicle. If that's what you think this is about, Meghan, then you've misunderstood everything. The studio crackled with energy. Even the co-hosts were scrambling, eyes darting to producers off camera, unsure whether to cut to commercial or just let it play out. Sarah Haynes tried to redirect the conversation, desperately, but was ignored. "You know what?" Meghan said, leaning forward, hands clasped tightly. "I've tried to stay gracious, but let's be honest. This isn't about humanitarian work. This is about one woman who can't stand the idea that others have found a way to make a difference without using their pain as performance." Angelina didn't flinch. She leaned back slowly in her chair, her expression unreadable, but dangerous. "You want to know what this is really about?" she said, voice low and deliberate. "Fine, let's talk about it." Angelina's voice dropped to barely a whisper, and somehow that made it 10 times more terrifying. "This is about the difference between doing the work and performing it," she said, each word deliberate, razor sharp, between changing lives and changing your image. And right now, everyone watching can see exactly which of us is which. The camera caught Meghan's face, cycling from disbelief to fury, then something else. Panic. For a split second, she looked like a cornered animal. She hadn't expected Angelina to come in this direct, this unshakable. The audience sat frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. "That's rich," Meghan snapped finally, her voice trembling with rage. "Coming from someone who's made a career out of playing the victim. At least I didn't have to adopt children from every continent to prove how compassionate I am. Some of us build families, others collect them like props." The gasp that rippled through the studio was audible. Even Whoopi Goldberg blinked, speechless. Angelina didn't flinch. Her face stayed still, but something shifted behind her eyes. A calm, dangerous fire. "You want to talk about my children," she said, her voice now a blade wrapped in silk. "Fine, let's talk." She leaned in, slow and steady. Every single one of them came from places most people wouldn't survive. They were abandoned, sick, unwanted. And now, they are loved, protected, thriving. Not because I wanted a headline, but because I refused to let them die forgotten. She stared directly at Meghan now. "Can you say the same about anything you've ever done?" Meghan's face fell. She knew she'd gone too far. But the damage was done. She tried to claw her way back with a faint smile. "Look, I didn't mean to. Things are clearly getting heated." "No." Angelina's voice cut through like a scalpel. "You meant every word." The room was dead quiet. "You think this is a competition of optics. You think humanitarian work is about who gets the better quote, who lands on the better magazine cover. You want to compare. Let's compare." The co-hosts looked at each other, helpless. This had gone far past television. It was a reckoning. "I've spent 20 years in war zones," Angelina said, her voice rising now with conviction. "I've sat beside mothers watching their children starve. I've held hands with girls brutalized by soldiers. I've spent my money, my platform, and my life to make sure their stories didn't disappear." She locked eyes with Meghan again. "And you? You've delivered speeches about empowerment from Beverly Hills. You've raised awareness while wearing diamonds bigger than most families' rent." Meghan tried to speak, but only managed a shaky, "I've worked with organizations." "Awareness?" Angelina repeated, and somehow made the words sound like poison. "You've raised awareness." "I've raised millions that went straight to the people who needed it. I've built schools, clinics, safe houses. I've changed laws. I've saved lives." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "But please, tell me more about your Instagram campaigns." The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. Somewhere, a phone buzzed. No one dared move. Meghan was crumbling now, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her carefully constructed calm slipping fast. But Angelina wasn't done. "You know what actually bothers me?" she said, leaning in. "It's not that you're ineffective. It's that you're taking up space. Space that should belong to people who actually want to do the work. Every time you attach yourself to a cause, it becomes about you. Your grief, your story, your camera angle." She shook her head, calm but lethal. "You've turned other people's suffering into content for your personal brand. And you call that charity?" No one spoke. No one could. It wasn't just a takedown. It was a live dissection. And the entire world was watching. Joy Behar finally broke the silence, her voice tight with panic. "Ladies, maybe we should all take a breath." "No," Angelina cut in, her eyes still locked on Meghan. "I think it's time someone finally said what everyone in this industry's been thinking." Her tone was calm. Her words were not. "You married into relevance and mistook that for authority. You positioned yourself as the voice of the voiceless. But you've never gone hungry. You've never been homeless. You've never been powerless. So tell me, what gives you the right to speak for people whose struggles you've never lived? Meghan's face flushed crimson. The composure was gone. Her polished mask cracked right there under the studio lights. You don't know what I've been through, Meghan snapped, voice trembling. You don't know anything about your struggles. Angelina's voice rose, sharp cutting, and the tension in the room instantly spiked. Your struggles, she repeated, stepping into the moment like she'd been waiting her whole life for it. You struggled with press coverage from inside a palace. You struggled with protocol while wearing jewels worth more than most people's homes. You struggled with criticism while protected by wealth and global fame. She leaned forward, her voice now low and lethal. Those aren't struggles. Those are inconveniences. The audience was still. Not a cough, not a breath. Just the sound of tension snapping like wires under pressure. Meghan glanced to the co-hosts, silently pleading for rescue. But none came. They were just as frozen, just as captivated. You think a few bad headlines make you an authority on oppression, Angelina said, her voice building. You think because you felt uncomfortable for the first time in your charmed life, you can speak for people who've faced war, poverty, violence. She paused, then delivered the line that landed like a thunderclap. That's not just ignorant. That's insulting. Meghan, grasping for control, tried one last angle. I've never claimed to speak for anyone, she said. I use my platform to amplify others. Amplify, Angelina echoed with a bitter laugh. No. You drown them out. Every cause becomes about you. Your healing, your trauma, your journey. She gestured at Meghan without looking away. You've turned activism into self-help. And that's not just ineffective. It's dangerous. The studio was dead silent. You could hear someone's earring clink in the audience. Meghan looked like she might cry, her hands trembling against the table. But Angelina wasn't finished. You want to know what really gets me? She asked, her voice now steady and tense and deeply personal. It's not that you're ineffective. It's that you take up space. Space that should belong to people who actually do the work. She didn't blink. Every time you latch onto a cause, it becomes about your story, your redemption arc. You turn other people's pain into content. And that's not charity. That's performance. And Meghan took a shaky breath. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but laced with defiance. You know what, Angelina? I think you're projecting. You can't handle that there are other women out there making a difference without turning their private lives into a public circus. She sat up straighter, seizing the moment. Maybe the real problem is that you're not the only celebrity activist in the room anymore. It landed like a counterpunch. The first flicker of confidence returned to Meghan's eyes. She thought she'd turned the tide. But Angelina leaned back, smiled, and ended it. Threatened, she said, almost casually. You want to know what threatens me? Her voice turned cold again, like steel wrapped in velvet. What threatens me is watching people suffer while celebrities play dress up as humanitarians. What threatens me is watching real issues get buried beneath PR campaigns, photo ops, and self-congratulatory speeches from inside gated mansions. She paused, just long enough for the air to hold its breath. What threatens me? She said finally. Who's knowing there are people dying right now, while your brand budget could have saved them. Whoopi Goldberg stood, clearly rattled. Angelina, I think maybe we... No. Whoopi. Angelina said without looking away. This is exactly the conversation we need to have. Because for too long, we've pretended that all charity work is created equal. That good intentions are enough. That showing up is the same as doing something. She turned back to Meghan. And meanwhile, real people, people who don't trend on social media, get left behind. Because their pain isn't photogenic enough. Meghan's voice was barely a whisper now. You're being unfair. You don't know what I've given up trying to make a difference. Angelina didn't even blink. Sacrificed, she said. You want to talk about sacrifice? Angelina's eyebrows lifted, just slightly, but it was the first time she looked genuinely stunned. You sacrificed what exactly? She said, her voice laced with disbelief. Your privacy, your comfort, your ability to control a narrative. Those aren't sacrifices. Those are the minimum cost of relevance. Her gaze didn't waver. You want to talk sacrifice? I've risked my safety in war zones. I've contracted illnesses in refugee camps. I've turned down career, making roles to spend months on the ground, not on red carpets. I've poured millions of my own money into causes no one will ever hear about, because I wasn't trying to be seen. The co-hosts were frozen. No cue cards, no prepped questions could help now. This was beyond damage control. This was something raw and irreversible. But you want to know the hardest sacrifice? Angelina's voice had started rising, building towards something final, like a verdict being read aloud. It's not the danger. It's not the money. It's giving up the luxury of making it all about you. She leaned forward. It's realizing that service means stepping aside. That your story doesn't matter more than the ones you're supposed to be amplifying. And that the second you start turning someone else's suffering into a backdrop for your brand, you've already failed. Meghan glanced around the studio, scanning faces for help, but found none. Just a sea of stunned expressions, some confused, others deeply sympathetic, and a few looked like they pitied her. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted this. I never asked for this level of scrutiny. I just wanted to help. Angelina's tone softened, but it didn't lose its edge. Then help. She paused. Stop talking about it. Stop performing it. Stop making their pain about your journey. She straightened in her chair, calm now, like she'd just placed the final stone on a grave. And if you can't do that without centering yourself, then step aside. Let the people who can actually do the work do it. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was absolute. Meghan looked gutted, pale, shaking. Her hands clenched the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Across from her, Angelina simply adjusted her blazer and checked her watch like nothing had happened. Finally, Whoopi cleared her throat. I think we're going to need to take a quick break. But the cameras kept rolling a few seconds longer, long enough for viewers to see Meghan's composure fully collapse. Her face cracked, eyes glassy, lips trembling. She looked like someone who just had their entire self, perception shattered, in front of millions. Meanwhile, Angelina didn't flinch. She sat in absolute stillness, controlled, grounded and apologetically resolute. The contrast was brutal and unforgettable. One woman had spent years curating an image. The other had just dismantled it in under 10 minutes. As the show finally cut to commercial, the studio sat frozen. No one clapped. No one whispered. They were processing something seismic. This wasn't just a celebrity spat. This was a reckoning. A brutal factual, emotionally devastating masterclass in calling out performative activism. And it had left no room for misinterpretation about which woman was walking the walk. What do you think? Did Angelina say what needed to be said? Or did she cross a line? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more explosive moments that mainstream TV never dares to show. And one final question. Can Meghan ever recover from what just happened? Or did the truth finally break through the brand?